is Herdr, an agent multiplexer that runs inside the terminal you already use, so you can run a bunch of coding agents side by side in different panes or tabs and actually see which one is working, which one is blocked, or which one is done, complete with system notifications in a single Rust binary, which means no Electron or no separate app. It even has a clever way of working over SSH. But with a tool like tmux growing in popularity, why would you bother using Herdr? Hit subscribe and let's find out. Herdr was built by a developer called Claude, who I'm assuming dropped the E from the word herder because he's a fan of the early 2000s. I don't know, but I'm assuming Herdr is a tool that you can use to herd multiple agents, like a sheep herder, which is a problem for, well, let's say most developers out there who are using AI to do development because it's difficult to keep track of what each harness is up to. Herdr takes lots of inspiration from tmux, which is a terminal multiplexer with tabs, split panes, and persists sessions even after you disconnect. But tmux was built decades ago, long before AI agents existed. So if you do end up running a harness inside one of its panes, it has no idea it exists or what its status is. This is why tools like Warp or cmux exist, which pull you out of your own terminal and into their own, so you have to learn someone else's workflow. Which is why Claude built Herdr to do both at once, the persistence of tmux with agent awareness baked in. And because Herdr is just one Rust binary built with ratatui, the whole thing is just rendering text to your terminal, so it can run anywhere that your terminal can, including over SSH. There's also a socket API, which means agents can drive Herdr themselves, which is really impressive to see. In fact, let's go through a quick demo. So after installing Herdr using brew or curl or even a Nix flake, I'm so glad they added this option, you can just run the Herdr command, which will give you this view showing the terminal, some workspaces and some agents. Now I have zoomed in a tiny bit, so there are a few things you won't be able to see, like the full extent of the commands, but I'll try and do my best to show Herdr off. So here you can see there aren't any workspaces, and by default the prefix is Control-B, which is similar to tmux, but I'll show you how to change that later on. Now the prefix has already been activated, which I can see by this navigate down here, so all I have to do is press Shift and N to create a new workspace. Now of course you can navigate entirely using your keyboard, so I can press the prefix and the question mark to see all the keyboard shortcuts, but you can also use your mouse, so I can create a new tab called 2, I can right click to close the tab, rename my workspace to test, create a new workspace, access these settings in the menu, and so on. I can even create horizontal and vertical splits, as well as renaming the specific pane and navigate between panes, all using the mouse. But the true selling point of Herdr is how it interacts with agents. So at the moment this is using bash, but I like to use fish, so I'll change both of these terminals. And then I'm going to open Claude Code on the top one and Codex on the bottom. But already we can see Herdr has automatically picked up on the agents and has given them statuses. So Claude is blocked and Codex is idle. Let's address them both by giving them access to these directories. And of course I can give them both prompts, like what model am I using? And we can see that Herdr immediately updates to tell us that Claude is working, which also works with Codex CLI. Now, I've also noticed I'm in the wrong workspace, so let's delete this one, and we'll rename this one to test. But with Herdr, the agents can also create workspaces, tabs, and splits as well. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to quit from Herdr by pressing prefix and then Q, and then you can see here all the options that the Herdr CLI gives us. So what I'm going to do is go back into Herdr, and this is one selling point, is that it goes back to the exact workspace and the exact agent I had open with the same sessions. But I'm going to create a new workspace. I'm going to go into a directory, and then I'm going to open up Claude Code. And now I'm going to give it a prompt to use Herdr CLI to spawn up 2 panes with Claude Code in them both. Run one with this prompt to summarize the largest file in the project, and another one with this prompt to search the codebase for any hard-coded API key or secrets. And here it's loaded up a new pane with Claude Code. I'm actually going to zoom out so we can see this a bit better. And now it's running the other prompt in the codebase. So we can scroll up to see that this one has finished. We can also see it's giving them appropriate titles, so Claude Secrets and just Claude. And here it's found no hard-coded API keys. Yes. From here, we can summarize the output of both panes and then get Claude to close them. So now it's got the information from the first pane and closed it, and it's doing the same to the second pane, which it's closed as well. And down here, it's giving me a nice summary. Now, because Herdr is just a binary that you can install into your terminal, I can SSH into a Linux server and install Herdr the same way I installed it on a Mac. You can see I've done this earlier, and it's restored my previous session. So I've got OpenCode open in one pane, and I'm using Vim to go through some code in another pane. But the problem with this is that it doesn't carry over my Herdr configuration settings I have on my local Mac machine. To be honest, I don't have many settings. All I've done is change the keys from Control-B to Control-Space, and I've changed the theme to Terminal. But if I had a highly edited configuration file with specific keyboard shortcuts, this could get quite annoying. So one way to get around this is to use Herdr with the remote flag and SSH directly into your server, which I'll explain exactly what it does before I hit enter. So Herdr works by running a server and a thin client that communicate using a Unix socket. So the client sends keystrokes to the server, and the server manages tabs, panes, persistence, and other things. Now, in the case of the SSH, so using remote, the server runs on the remote machine and the client actually runs on your local machine. So it sends keystrokes via a Unix socket to the server, and the server can show the client the files that are on the machine itself, but the client itself can use all the configuration settings that are on the local machine that it's attached to. So let's take a look at that in action. So back to where we left off. Now if I hit enter, it's going to connect directly to my SSH machine, which we can see has OpenCode and the code file that we're viewing with Vim. But if I press Ctrl B, it doesn't seem to do anything because it's using the configuration on my Mac, which works with Ctrl space to see the prefix. Now, while we're here, let's have a look at what else we can do in the menu. So we can view keybinds, which I showed you earlier, but we can also change the theme. And Herdr gives you many themes to choose from Nord to Govbox and even Caputin. And there's also an option to trigger sound alerts and a toast menu, which you can change between inside Herdr, via the terminal, or via the system. Now, as usual, there are so many other features of Herdr that I didn't get around to going through, like work tree integrations, official harness integrations, some of which you saw in the demo, that give your harness access to Herdr official skills and lets you resume the exact sessions you had before you closed Herdr. Honestly, the fact that this works in your existing terminal, to me, is the main selling point, because as much as I love using tmux, I love using westterm a lot more. I've configured it to the exact way I like to use it, and the fact that if I want to manage my agents, all I have to do is spin up a new terminal tab inside westterm and just run Herdr. Yes, you do miss the web browser from tmux, but to be honest, I didn't really use it much anyway. And for those of you watching right now who use Windows, I have some really bad news for you. Because of the whole Unix socket thing and the fact that Herdr uses a terminal PTY, there isn't currently great Windows support at the time of recording. But if you are using Windows, I think it's time to bite the bullet and just dual boot Linux. Yes, WSL does exist, but it's not exactly the same, right?